Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching. It is the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. I'm your host, Barry Welsh. Again, thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button. Doesn't cost anything. Hit that little bell for notifications so you know when we're on. Also, if you would, hit the thumbs up for a like. And if you feel so inclined, leave a comment. If you want to help support the show financially, $ American Doofus, all one word, is the way to do that through the Cash App. And if you'd like to contact me, it is American Doofus, once again, all one word, AMERICANDUFUS. And that's at gmail.com. It is coming up on the 100th anniversary of what was known as the Tulsa massacre. And there will be many events, including protests, coming up in Tulsa this weekend. I mention that because it's worth a reminder that if someone has fear, and they use their vehicle to escape protesters, and if they run over protesters, they are immune from prosecution, much like police are immune from prosecution oftentimes. Also, President Joe Biden is going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this to celebrate this 100th year since this horrible event, and that means there will be what they call advanced forces, advanced details, security, FBI. There will be a lot of federal officers in and around Tulsa this coming weekend. So if you're going to be there, just keep those things in mind. You might see people on rooftops that are actually federal officers, or in high rises, or we pray for an absolutely peaceful situation in Tulsa this week. The exact opposite of what it was 100 years ago. And we're going to talk about the story of Tulsa briefly, and we're going to talk about what happened before Tulsa as well. Oklahoma honored with presence of the world's greatest living Negro. That is a picture you see on the screen of George Washington Carver. And George Washington Carver was so impressed with Greenwood, the area in Tulsa that would become Black Wall Street, that he actually called it Negro Wall Street, and it was changed to Black Wall Street. So George Washington Carver is actually who's responsible for that name. And just a little bit of footage then and now. And I want to share a couple of other views. This is what it looked like leading up to the massacre. Black prominence. It was an area that a mecca, if you will, for Black entrepreneurs, Black business people, Black businessmen at that time. They had their own schools, they had their own churches, they had their own businesses. Money stayed within that community and circulated within that community, sometimes up to 35 times the dollar would stay in that community, and wealth began developing. And the white people of Tulsa were not happy about that. it was a tinderbox at the time, all across the nation. Um, there were locations, literally all across the nation, where race race riots broke out. That was the term that was used, was race riot, when actually Tulsa and what we're seeing was so bad that it was called a massacre. Now, it was reported many different ways. Um, some papers only reported that white people had been killed. Um, it, it there are many videos, many very good videos. So many that I couldn't pick one that totally represented the story. So I recommend you find one and you learn about the Tulsa massacre if you don't already know. Um, just real briefly, it started with a 19-year-old black young man named Dick Rowland and a 17-year-old white young woman named Sarah Page. And there has always been in America the concept of the infallibility and the must protect the white woman. And this situation again, at that the time in 1921 when this happened, there had been years of racial tensions. Um, there had been a lot of black soldiers coming back from World War One, and thinking they had earned the respect of their fellow citizens, to find out that white supremacy was on an incredible rise. So much so that the KKK would eventually dominate politics. Um, sound familiar? I don't know, just something to think about. But that was the situation. And there are varying stories, as I said. Some say that this young black man, Dick Rowland, was a shoeshine boy. Some say he worked for a telegraph company and he delivered messages for a messenger service. Somewhere between entering the elevator on the first floor of the building, an elevator operated by Sarah Page, somewhere between the first floor and the third floor, either something happened or a lie was told. There was a scream. The elevator opened on the third floor. Sarah Page ran out one direction, and Dick Rowland ran out the other. And there was a headline in the paper, and it simply said, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator." And that led to the eventual arrest of Dick Rowland. It led to a white mob amassing in the courthouse, which led to a group of armed black men, a lot of them veterans recently returned from World War One, as I mentioned earlier, coming down to the courthouse to protect this 19-year-old young black man. And the sheriff telling them, that he could protect one black man, that he didn't need the help of those volunteering. And in the instance of leaving, one white man tried to disarm one of the black men at that time, and that white man ended up dead. And as I've said before, it's never one shot. I've heard people say, "Oh, one shot sets everything off." It's the first shot, because once the first shot happens, others come. And And that was the match, the accusation, no matter the truth behind it, the accusation of attacking girl in an elevator. Those were the words that the newspaper used. And that became the match that set off Tulsa, Oklahoma, basically. And currently there's a congressional investigation underway here in 2021 of what happened 100 years ago. I went back and looked to see about investigations in that time period. There was nothing. It was attempted to be swept under the rug. Again, we didn't hear about it in our history classes. And one of the other confusing things is, was this the first time the United States was bombed from the air? Did this actually happen in 1921, 20 years ahead of Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese bombed the US Pacific Fleet? There are mixed accounts on that. Again, the government at that time, much like the government in this time, doesn't always tell everything. And the newspapers at that time, much like some of the media at this time, goes along with not having everything be told. So I'll just leave that at that. There were 6 planes flying over the Greenwood section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Whether they actually bombed or not, I don't have documentation of that. I would think that it would be hard to light something and throw it out of a plane and hit the target. That doesn't mean it wasn't tried. And that doesn't mean that's not the way that many church buildings, many business buildings, the roofs caught on fire from incendiary devices being thrown from these planes, basically bombing as well as burning and looting and killing and everything else that happened. Again, so many good documentaries that, because it is the 100th anniversary, and if you weren't aware of it, make yourself aware of it. Even if you're the most bigoted white racist there is, take a look at this, because maybe the inhumanity will touch you in a way that you might be able to make a change. Hey, you never know. But there was something before Tulsa, and something that a lot of people don't know about that happened before Tulsa. This happened in not Tulsa, Oklahoma, but in Elaine, Arkansas.
It was called the Red Summer of 1919, named for the blood that ran through America's cities during months of racial unrest. African-American soldiers had returned home from the Great War, World War I, to a country still teeming with discrimination. And in their quest for civil rights, tensions between blacks and whites reached a tipping point. Deadly race riots broke out in over 24 cities, but one rural town, Elaine, Arkansas, would become the epicenter for the bloodshed. The violence there, lynch mobs, torture, indiscriminate murder, was so horrific it would go down in history not as a race riot, but as the Elaine massacre. This is history. Dark history. During World War I, more than 350,000 African-American soldiers enlisted to serve. But while they fought for democracy abroad, their own country, America, was still not willing to see them as equal.
White supremacy was very mainstream at this time in the United States. Basically, a lot of African Americans were seeking to obtain their full rights and equality in the United States, and violence was often used by mobs of whites.
Tensions reached a boiling point in the summer of 1919. Race riots broke out in dozens of cities across the country. But in the rural South, something even more menacing was.
Each one of the red dots you see is where a so-called race riot broke out. Mobs of whites attacking black people.
Taking form. where slavery existed in all but name. In a system called sharecropping, farmers provided landowners with labor for a share of crops produced, but the system was rigged. Sharecroppers were often kept in perpetual debt.
One black sharecropper raised $500 worth of cotton, and his landlord told him, yeah, but you used $697 worth of supplies, so you owe me money.
Everyone who has any power at this point is working to make sure they keep African American laborers tied to the land.
As small towners, we've
Apologies there, that commercial didn't pop up when I was previewing this excellent piece of work by the New York
For
Post.
years, the system went unchecked. In the fall of 1918, a black man from Arkansas had had enough. Robert Hill had decided to form a union to represent sharecroppers. It was a dangerous decision, and one that would set off a chain of events involving mass murder, torture, and a landmark Supreme Court ruling. But first, he would need to organize.
In his message, Hill was pretty simple and direct. Why is it that we cannot have fair payment for the honest and hard work we do?
Despite the inherent risk involved with challenging whites, World War I veterans and other black sharecroppers became card-carrying members of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America.
We believe that by paying dues, these members could have the services of lawyers and sue plantation owners for cotton that had been stolen from them and false numbers that have been placed in the plantation stores' books.
On the night of September 30th, 1919, Union members gathered in Elaine to discuss their legal plan.
This is in Phillips County. It's basically just a crossroads at this time, a road, a few houses, a railroad siding, no streetlights. There's also a one-room wooden church, and that's where the Union met. Expecting that they might have trouble, the Union posted a guard of about 6 men. They had shotguns and rifles. The meeting's taking place. While they're having this discussion, a car rolls up the road.
2 white men were in the car.
By one account, one of the white men in the car said, "You all get away from there." And shortly thereafter, a shot was fired.
Though it remains unclear who fired first, a barrage of gunfire broke out.
Once again, it's never just one shot, and oftentimes no one remembers who shot first.
A white man was killed almost instantly. The rumor of a black uprising spread in a matter of hours.
Imagine how, if something happens in Tulsa this weekend and it gets blamed on the black community, in 1919, it spread within hours. Imagine how fast it would spread in 2021 with the electronic and computer capacities we have. We must always be safe. We must always be vigilant. This is why we document. Those of us that do these kind of things is so that there will be records. We will show the truth. We won't show you 15 seconds of a dumpster fire. We'll show you the whole 3.5 hours of what led up to and encompassed and motivated whatever it is that's happening. And it's important. And while I'm speaking on that, I want to thank all the live streamers, everyone that's boots on the ground that we use some of their footage here on this program, and we will be doing so this coming weekend. Back to
the idea of a sharecropper rebellion conveniently played into the hands of landowners who did not want their sharecropping practices scrutinized. They did all they could, as quickly as they could, to sound alarms that black farmers were out for white blood.
The story gets magnified that the town is under attack, that blacks are killing people in the streets, that there's a revolution afoot.
The sharecroppers quickly formed self-defense groups, expecting the repercussions of the death of a white man. But they could not have predicted just how severe the response would be. The following morning, under the watchful eye of Sheriff Frank Kitchens and his deputies, posses of white men were sent to find, detain, and kill the offenders.
When you have an out-of-control mob just being told there's a Negro insurrection going on, that mob's being very indiscriminate in its violence. You see houses being attacked, black-owned homes being ransacked.
The black school was burnt. Notable families were killed.
Black women and children have to go literally hide out in the woods because many of these people are indiscriminately shooting at African American women and their children.
Black veterans and other African Americans took up arms in self-defense.
This no doubt just feeds into the mob fervor. The fact that, oh, they're daring to shoot back at us. This must really be an insurrection.
One historian has identified more than 20.
I'm going to pause it here for just a second, because what you just heard identified is privilege, and that's still going on today. A lot of the people that let's just say the people that supported or were part of what happened January 6th on the United States Capitol, those people still to this day would come into a potential conflict with a group of armed black people with the concept of, well, they're not going to shoot back. And if you're one of those white people, not only are they going to shoot back, but this is not the same mentality. This is not the same this is not the same heart and soul. This is not the 1960s. And if you decide that, I'm just so concerned about the lack of understanding between the white community and the black community in general. I'm not talking about individual situations, but in general, and it's deadly. And Tulsa reminds us of that.
20 different killing sites where African Americans were being killed.
There are stories that mob members were taking souvenirs, such as ears or fingers from the bodies of fallen African Americans.
One of the leading black families of the county, they weren't even in the town. They had just received a brother back from the French front. They are pulled from a train, put in the back of a car, and they are stabbed, shot, and their mutilated bodies are left on the side of the road.
Within 2 days, 500 U.S. troops were sent to quell the supposed black uprising.
They don't find any blacks killed.
Again, it's termed a black uprising when actually it's white people the stuff like this is uncomfortable. Stuff like this is hard, but stuff like this has to be done.
Or shooting down the streets. In fact, Colonel Jenks reports that the city is filled with hundreds and hundreds of white men with guns. Many of the individuals who were hiding in the thickets were former soldiers who had just gotten back from the war. And when they see the army troops come, they rush out, believing that the army troops are there to assist them. The army believes that these people are rushing toward them to attack, and they're cut down by machine gun fire.
Although the exact number will never be known, a recent estimate suggests 237 black men, women, and children were killed. There was an immediate demand for justice, but not for the black lives lost. 5 white men were also killed in the fighting. Hundreds of African Americans were rounded up and put in jail, and when the jail was full, they detained the rest in a schoolhouse.
While they are detained, there is torture going on.
The goal? To elicit false confessions of a black uprising.
They whipped the men, whipped them for long periods of time. They stuffed formaldehyde up their noses, and they stripped them naked and shocked them with electrical charges. They did this until they confessed to the conspiracy.
Robert Hill escaped to Kansas, but his peers back in Arkansas were not as lucky. 122 indictments were issued, and trials quickly started.
The men were brought into the court in chains. They weren't allowed to consult with their defense attorney. The defense attorney rarely interjected, and then the all-white jury started delivering guilty verdicts. In one case, the guilty verdicts came back in 2 minutes.
It's also important to point out that there were mobs of people outside who were demanding black blood. Governor Bruff maintained that at some point these people would be killed, but they would have to have been killed justly.
The governor lived up to his word. When among the 87 black citizens charged with crimes, 12 were sentenced to death by electric chair. Despite the system being blatantly rigged against them, the convicted men had one unlikely beacon of hope: the American justice system. The trials of the Elaine 12 had been highly publicized. The NAACP took notice and stepped in with legal help from the 12. For 4 years, the team faced a series of legal setbacks and advances until in 1923, the case made its way to the Supreme Court in what is now known as Moore versus Dempsey. There, the defense argued that the original trials had been mob-dominated and the black prisoners had been denied their constitutional rights. In a landmark decision, the court agreed.
The good that comes out of this is that the NAACP sees for the first time that it can win in the Supreme Court, that things don't always fall along the color lines.
The 12, subjected to torture, injustice, and litigation travesty, were at long last exonerated and released in January 1925. They might have escaped with their lives, but there was nothing that could reverse the pain and devastation felt by the black community in Phillips County, and no way to unsee the ungodly truth that American men, alongside the American government, were complicit in a massacre of American citizens on American soil.
We, as a nation, have grown and we continue to grow. We don't need to pretend as if we've always had everything figured out, but if we are to do justice to who we are as Americans, we've got to own all of it.
Absolutely. So, a story you might not have heard before, the story of Elaine, Arkansas, as we move towards the 100th year since Tulsa. Again, an incident that, 2 incidents we should have known about, but for some reason, we weren't taught. And now we're 100 years down the road, and time does not bring justice. Okay, time does not bring justice. Time does not erase wrongdoings. Time does not bury things. All will come to the light. Time doesn't bring justice. Time only magnifies injustice. Just something to think about. We're going to have our eyes on Iran, Israel, Palestine. We're going to be talking about those things coming up. This coming weekend, we're going to be having our eyes on Louisville, on Tulsa, on Washington, D.C., because do not think that those that attacked the Capitol on January 6th will not be back. And they will come back at a time of significance. Memorial Day weekend, a possibility now that the National Guard is out of Washington, D.C. I think it's going to be July 4th, but we'll keep an eye on the Capitol this weekend as well. And we will be live Saturday to show you what's going on around our country and potentially around the world. And we'll be back very soon with another episode. So again, make sure you hit the notification bell. Please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 3,600 by the end of this weekend. I need about 40 more subscribers. And please like and share and comment if you would. I greatly appreciate every one of you watching. Thank you so very much. I love all of you. Shalom, Salam, peace, namaste. Blessings upon each and every one of you. If you want to help support the show, it's $ American Doofus. You want to email me, it's americandoofus@gmail.com. It is a dark world. Try to be a light. Again, thank you so much for watching. It's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. I'm your host, Barry Walsh. Until next time.